we're getting to the spot where it's like, and insert your credit card. She's like, hey, my machine just went out. And then looks over to the person to her left, and sure enough, down the line there, and sure enough, everybody's, saying the same thing, looking left and right. And I'm like, well, this isn't good.
Welcome to This Is Fine, the podcast where we navigate the chaotic world of tech in the government, tech in the enterprise, with a touch of humor and a dash of snark. I'm your host, Matt Triner, CEO of Hunter Strategy, and today we were supposed to be diving into the fascinating and somewhat overlooked realm of secure firmware, but we're going to call a little bit of an audible today because we are in the middle of a global outage that is being called a Microsoft outage, a CrowdStrike outage, but for sure it means that a lot of flights aren't getting off the ground. And our guest, Jake Williams, today had a very interesting experience checking into his hotel for an event he is staffing out west. So we're going to call a little bit of an audible and talk a little bit about the global outage that is occurring today with CrowdStrike / Microsoft. Let me start off by saying we're very early into this outage. We don't know everything that's going on. We have our theories, and let's just talk about it.
Yeah.
So Jake, welcome to this slightly impromptu episode.
Yeah, definitely, man. Pleasure to be here. I mean, I'd much rather be, talking to you from a room that I actually have a, hotel room that I'm both checked into and have a key for, but hey, I mean, as
or the one that you booked, maybe
for
the space
whatever,
you're supposed to be in.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. So I woke up this morning, and I have a family member that works for the FDA who comes in and says, "I can't get on my laptop, so I guess I have part of the day off this morning." And my first thought was, oh my God, Hunter laptops are down.
Oh no.
And then she was like, no, it's my FDA laptop. So then I looked, and my first thought is I go to Twitter, and there's a lot of posts. I go to LinkedIn, there's a lot of posts. Mm-hmm. So it seems as though, at least from best publicly available statements from CrowdStrike, that CrowdStrike pushed an update to their Azure cloud controllers, and that has cascaded to cause a failure for all CrowdStrike Windows devices. Jake, does that sound like what you've heard? Does it sound a little different? That's my unscripted review here.
Yeah, so I think it's actually a little bit different. I actually had a chance to watch it live, sadly, while I was trying to check in. As you mentioned, I'm out west. I'm out in Vegas, right? So, but I had a chance to watch it live at a Marriott property, right, where as literally they're trying to check me in, machine started blue screening, and it says csagent.sys, and I'm like, I know that guy, right? I'm familiar with that name. It's like customer service agent. I'm like, no, it's not customer service. There's no customer service there. That's CrowdStrike. And I don't mean to say our customer service is bad. I just mean CS doesn't stand for that. So it looks like what happened. Now, again, the as far as the backup root cause, we don't know, but it looks like they pushed a CrowdStrike last night, or one of the CrowdStrike folks described it as not quite an update, right? So meaning not a software update where we're actually changing a driver or DLL component, but one of the content definitions. We usually refer to these outside the industry as the endpoint protection is your signature files, right? And that ultimately is what's causing the crash. Bottom line, right? We're stuck in blue screen loops for anybody that got this. The only route out is booting into safe mode and removing that content update so that the machine can boot.
Well, and so let's talk about the feelings from an end user perspective. So you say you got there and you couldn't check in. What seemed to be the impact from a customer, relation standpoint when you walked into that Marriott property?
Well, I mean, as I first walked in, like, again, I said, I got a chance to see this live. So as I first walked in, everything's cool. They're, starting to process, and we're getting to the spot where it's like, and insert your credit card. She's like, hey, my machine just went out. And then looks over to the person to her left, and sure enough, down the line there, and sure enough, everybody's, saying the same thing, looking left and right. And I'm like, well, this isn't good. They couldn't complete a check-in, can't issue room keys. And of course, that's a property that, like so many now, require a room key even to get on the elevator. And so I think Marriott uses Bing card, if I remember correctly. But I mean, regardless, it's still going to code those Bing card or whatever the little little hotel cards are. So I'm like, okay, clearly, this will be fun, right? But I was like, maybe my Hilton friends don't use CrowdStrike. And on a whim, hopped a lift over to a property I stay at a lot in Vegas, and just happened to be a little farther away from where I was going to be this morning, and came over, and sure enough, all their stuff is down too. They can't take credit cards. They can't check anyone in. By the way, all the mobile keys for Hilton were down last night too. So everybody that uses their, says, oh, let me do the mobile check-in, and then I'll just go use my NFC, right, for my room key. They're all standing in line down at the front desk. And so by dumb luck, because I've been here so many times at this particular hotel, I lucked out where the night manager recognized me. She's like, oh, honey, I'm like, yeah, yeah. So she walked me up to an empty room, right, with not issuing me a key, not checking me in, just with the little master key fob that she's got. So now I'm sitting in a room that I have no reservation for and also have no key for, right? But here we are.
So it's an interesting impact, right? At least for people that don't think in systems, because the key readers are working. Those don't operate on a system based on Windows, I guess, or if they do, they don't have CrowdStrike on them. But it's the issuing side,
right?
It's not like every door unlocked in the building, like in those prison movies where like something went wrong and all the doors spring open. But I mean, it's still a complete stop of business operations. And to your point, like you can't even, it's not that the elevator key fob isn't working or the elevator stopped with people stuck in the elevator, but you can't use the elevator because they can't give you a key to open the elevator door and go to a floor.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And of course, to your point, right, you think in systems, and you and I both know that that's, that elevator key fob's hooked up to a physical access control system or a PAC system someplace. Probably very likely a Mercury controller on the back end or something. And that's got to connect to something else. And right. And so, you and I understand obviously that chain of, the chain of things that has to happen as you go and hold that card down, right? But again, if you don't think about that stuff, if you've never been exposed to it, it's really easy to be like, why is this not working, right?
Well, and it makes me think about incident response planning and things that we talk about all the time and why we push tabletop exercises to customers with critical infrastructure, because I'm sure that lots of time went into understanding redundancies on those PAC systems so that you don't get people stuck in an elevator,
right.
So you don't have, fire and health and safety hazards, which, to be fair, I don't think at least not in your story, we're not talking about a physical health and safety hazard, which is the good news, right? Or at least, I mean, and if you disagree, I'd love to hear your thoughts, but it's absolutely a business hazard in that there's no new check-ins, you can't collect on it. Even people that are already checked in are going to be like, I want my money back. I couldn't order this. I couldn't do this. Like, even though you happen to get a key before the outage, there's going to be many things they can't order room service. They can't get things done. They might not be able to check out. So they don't know what their bill is when they leave. And everybody loves to just be like, oh yeah, I trust, hotel chain to charge me what is fair based on having zero accountability for the stay. Yeah. So that's kind of but I'm curious. One is I'd like to hear what you think about how people should look at incident response and disaster and recovery planning based on something like a really novel outage like this. If you disagree with my characterization of a mostly business impact, I'm curious what you think about that as well.
Oh, well, I mean, I can tell you one of my other contacts here in Vegas hit me up at maybe, 45 minutes after I got in the room here, so an hour and a half after it happened. But he said one of the whole casino floors shut down over here. His lights went out, I don't know what chain of events set that in motion. And as you well know, right, during incident response, particularly when we're talking about IT disaster recovery, we often end up with some self-inflicted wounds, right? Or reboot the wrong thing out of panic, or turn it off and turn it back on again without knowing what the impact of that is. And so but there are several 911 call centers that went down nationwide as a result of the impact. I heard some reports of that last night. So I would be reluctant to say that there's no, physical safety impact here, right? In meat space as a result of this global scale. I mean, look, let's call this what it is, right? This is a global scale denial of service on par with NotPetya. So if we're going to roll back to the Maersk event, right, the big NotPetya event where Russia was targeting Ukraine, this is circa 2017, where Maersk goes down. Or by the way, if you want to read about that, Andy Greenberg has a fantastic book called Sandworm. You owe it to yourself if you're a cybersecurity aficionado to read that book. But this is at the same scale. The only difference here, or the biggest difference, is that that was a ransomware, effectively a wiper, but it was a ransomware binary that They just weren't giving the keys up for. The recovery there involved rebuilding all their systems. The recovery here involves rebooting to safe mode, but that means you've got to be in front of your computer in most cases. And if you're doing the do and you have BitLocker encryption, that means you need the BitLocker key too. And so this is non-trivial for a lot of folks. So I could go on for a while, right? But like there are real IT impact or real business impacts here. I guess if I can shift over though, you talked about tabletop exercises, right? And I know this is a passion both for both of us, right? It's drill on the potential disasters, right, that you're going to run into, and at least think about how you're going to handle this stuff. If not, build some muscle memory with the response plan. Organizations that work through tabletop exercises like the ones that we offer at Hunter. In fact, I was actually just in New York City, facilitating tabletop in Manhattan yesterday. And so those organizations come out the other side of incidents like this way, way, way better. Nothing to do to prevent them, right? We sure can be better prepared to respond to them.
So let's pretend that we're a couple days from now, still not knowing root cause, because I don't want to get too far into conspiracy theorizing on what happened, because I'm sure that's the good, CrowdStrike is a good company and they will tell us what happened, and they'll give us, the dirty details of it as soon as they're known. My question is what are the types of mitigations people can have when it's kind of like the front door to your castle is just locked and the thing that issues the keys is gone. Obviously, having machines that are not participating in your EDR has its own risks. And I'd love to be part of an assessment. Well, we don't put that machine under management or EDR patching, because what if those fail? I mean, that's a dubious answer there. So I'm curious if you can think of any mitigation strategies to deal with this, other than and it's a very valid answer to be like, this is a thing you're supposed to trust. This is a thing that's supposed to work every time. And the businesses need to hold CrowdStrike accountable for the outages and the costs that were incurred, because there's really nothing else to do here.
Yeah, so I posted a tweet last night, as this was going. It's already had 2,000 retweets and, well over 1 million impressions. And I'll just read it verbatim here, because I think it kind of bears repeating. But I'm just throwing this out here, but maybe a vendor having the ability to change every one of their kernel drivers in the field at the same time without any approval from IT and end users is a model we need to reconsider. You and I both know that from a security perspective, we're both old enough to have actually done IT with floppy disks, right? So not to date either Matt or myself here, right? But cut our teeth on Solaris and HPUX and right, SCO in a couple of cases.
I even had early Windows 95 that had 27 floppies to install, because I remembered being like, well, I could buy the CD, but not all of my computers have a CD drive, and I really don't want to lug around an external, which required separate power back then, was not a trivial thing. And then the drivers, maybe it won't even work on the machine I'm trying to use. So I remember even up to Windows 95, we had floppies.
You were going to hook it up over a parallel port too, right? So
that's right.
I seriously remember my parallel port zip disks, right? Anyway, not to go down the nostalgia lane here, right? But look, man, we're both old enough to remember where we manually installed antivirus updates and security product updates. And I don't mean updates just in the sense of, hey, it's a new version of the agent, but updates in the sense that, here are the new signature updates for you, right? And the reality is that, as time's gone on, to keep up with modern threat actors, to stay ahead of modern threat actors, we've really moved into that position of, no, it's real-time update. And look, from CrowdStrike or anybody else's, in that field perspective, they don't want you to be able to opt out of updates, right? If you're going to run their product, right? Because, it's not like, hey, delay my updates by 6 hours, right? CrowdStrike will be the first to tell you, and I know you confirm, this is 6 hours, right? The difference in getting a signature for that long can be the difference between them catching something and you having a really good day, or them not and you having a really bad ransomware event. I don't think there's an easy, one size fits all kind of space here, right? But it's definitely something we're going to have to look at for an operating model, because we talk all the time about third-party risk. But my friend, as you all know, if you want to run EDR, this is not just a CrowdStrike problem. This is a third-party risk that we universally accept.
To your tweet from before, I guess it's certain, and I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure, and I'm not endorsing or giving any reviews of products in this case, but I'm pretty sure with Defender, it's the same model, right? Defender is going to push those definitions pretty universally. So, but that's not true of every endpoint tool. And I say that not EDR. Yes, I agree with you on EDRs, but I'm thinking in other endpoint security tools like antivirus. Many of those require you to have staged definition downloads and pushing with enterprise servers. Now, a lot of people have eschewed antivirus because EDR and antivirus have a pretty significant overlapping Venn diagram. But it's almost like if you look towards that older model of having a McAfee enterprise server and allowing your IT to push the rollout of definitions in some staged manner, that would have been a mitigation here if CrowdStrike, and again, I'm not suggesting that we go back to the client server EPO model because it feels like that's a little regressive, but you should, from your cloud controller, maybe CrowdStrike and Defender and SentinelOne, all of the major players out there should consider that they push these updates as an opt-in. And maybe if you don't do it within 30 days, like I get that it's organizationally complex and expensive for them to let you live on an old definition forever, but maybe there should be a period where you get to make the determination of risk for 30 days, 60 days. They're the company. They got to figure out the math on how long they can sustain a fork in operational baselines. But that seems like a reasonable measure to ask for from our EDR vendors to some degree, is to be like, you guys need to give us some time period to do this when we can, and also some ability to segment it among rollouts, right? It's like, let's roll it out to our accounting team where if, it's important that they have access, but like we can still check people in if accountants can't get to the accounting system.
Right.
They're definitionally slower and have a monthly or quarterly cadence that they're following versus a desk check-in team at Marriott that is 24/7 checking people in a cadence that at best would be described on an hourly basis is really described in a minute-by-minute basis. And so that would be an interesting shift that I also think that, SentinelOne or Microsoft were to push. Again, I'm a fan of CrowdStrike. I want to be very clear. I'm not taking this opportunity to hit on them for a mistake, but it's almost like what a marketing opportunity for competition to be able to go in and be like, hey, remember that thing that happened with CrowdStrike? Thanks to this new delayed release feature or staged release. Delayed sounds like bad marketing, so I'm kind of marketing on the fly. But this staged release feature that we've now implemented in Defender, never have a CrowdStrike style outage again. And there's this constant push and pull with CISOs and, you're telling me, and because we're a CrowdStrike reseller, we like CrowdStrike, and we tell people that it has a lower system resource impact than Defender has, and it's also Defender claims to have some heuristics, and it does, but it's very largely signature based. And CrowdStrike and SentinelOne both have a much, they've by coming later into the market, by not having to carry forward all of the legacy of Microsoft ATP the way that Defender really had to, they kind of leapfrog the detection approaches, and they're much more lightweight, and I think that they have a smaller attack surface for that reason. So now the question is that wouldn't that be like people are constantly in this, well, why do I want to pay more for a service that I already get bundled with my E5 licensing that I know I need? Right? That's a constant push and pull for a lot of features, right? CrowdStrike, Slack versus Teams. It's a constant push and pull in the Microsoft ecosystem. I know Microsoft is not the most agile feature release company out there, but wouldn't this, if they could make that claim, I think you're going to have a lot of people saying, well, the end users need to suffer a little bit in performance. I can't have the risk of a vendor that takes over my kernel updates and Microsoft gives me control. Wouldn't that be just a really powerful marketing capability for fundamentally what I believe to be a laggard product?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting kind of take there, right? I guess a couple of things, right? First, Slack versus Teams, man, that's just sacrilege because Teams is garbage, right? Defender isn't garbage, right? We should also mention, by the way, right, and again, I love the CrowdStrike operating model, in the way that the agent works. One of the reasons they're lightweight is that they don't scan files, right? They only look at what's being launched into memory. As much as I love that, I got to tell you, when you start seeing things like, AU Killer, right, and other bring your own vulnerable driver attacks, etc., those aren't signatured by CrowdStrike. Yikes, we got a chicken egg problem there, right? Because the malware can get written to, the malware can live without being executed. And I regularly analogize this. I know you got kids and you've taken them to daycare before, and I regularly analogize this to imagine you're dropping your kids off at daycare and you walk back to the cubbies and you see that the cubbies have a couple of live grenades and maybe some knives, for the kids to play with. And the security guard that stands there next to the cubbies, the hypothetical security guard, says, "Don't worry, I'll stop them from ever touching the grenades. They're safe in the cubby," right? You're going to let your kid drop their lunchbox in the cubby right next to that? Absolutely not. You're going to pick them up and walk them right out the door, right? But that's the CrowdStrike model.
No, it's a good analogy. I've never really thought of it like that before. I've never thought of the analogy in such physical terms. And yeah, you're right. I mean, I would not want my children to drop off their lunchbox next to a set of grenades, if for no other reason than my son can't put his thing in any specific spot. He's going to knock stuff around in the cubby and it's going to knock over. And I don't know the digital equivalent of that, but there definitely is one.
Well, look, all analogies break down. This one probably precipitously, right? Because, they would tell you, well, we would catch it when it was being written, and don't worry, we definitely really, really will catch it, and dot, dot, dot. But I mean, there is a benefit to having file scanning. And I just, again, I always like to highlight that CrowdStrike is super lightweight for a reason. There were design trade-offs that were made. That said, I've deployed it a lot in my own practices too, right? Prior to coming to Hunter, for that exact reason, because there are systems that I can get it down on and get world-class protection on that I can't run a lot of the competitors on, because their operating model, yes, is more comprehensive, but also it's too high overhead for the given hardware that I can't update.
And that's a complex trade-off also, right? Is, how much efficiency is being gained? What's the cost of upgrading all of that hardware? Mm-hmm. What's the time and delays and things and rolling out such an upgrade to do it? Also, Defender, it will not install on Windows Server. It's not that it's not supported. It literally, as soon as you try to do it, it's like, nope, can't do it. Right. And it's because it wasn't, I mean, to be fair, I give Microsoft credit for not letting you abuse Defender in the wrong way, as is the tendency of many, galaxy brained IT admins that are going to say, well, I know you're not supposed to use Defender for this, but in my 853 checklist, I need malware detection in the server enclave, and Defender is free. And so, whereas CrowdStrike is very much built to do that on server endpoints. And so it's almost like there needs to be, like with everything else, right? I'm always advocating for deeper understanding in the risk trade-offs.
Right.
It feels like there needs to be just some better education in, what are you missing by not doing file scanning? What are you gaining? Is there a formula where you could figure out the risk analysis trade-off there that is a pluggable thing for CISOs and risk managers to determine at what number and what ratio do you accept that risk? I don't have a good answer, honestly. I'm just kind of rambling. It's a very interesting problem to solve.
Yeah, and real quick too, you were talking, some marketing things earlier. Let's throw some marketing shade, right? Because you were talking about Defender. Let's not confuse that with Defender for Endpoint, right? Which is the EDR product, right? But
no, it's a fair
18
point.
18 different Defenders now. I feel like there's Defender for Copilot, for Defender for Security Copilot now. Did I drop a Defender in there?
Defender for Identity, Defender for Cloud. Yeah, I know you're absolutely
Defender
right. I did use the colloquial Defender because, to be fair, it was the first one. Defender for Endpoint was the first Defender. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's legacy terminology. Wasn't it?
So you say Defender for Endpoint. If you mean that from a branding perspective, no. If you mean it from a Defender that ran on endpoints, then yes, right? Which makes me want to go murder a marketing person. Right.
I meant from a branding perspective, it was the first product that Microsoft called Defender, I think.
I don't think so. I think Defender rolls with Vista, if I recall correctly, because remember Vista's where they update the you can no longer do DCOM in direct kernel object manipulation in x64. and you have to go start using the kernel callbacks and the mini filter and so they rolled Defender with that. I think in part because a lot of the antivirus folks just weren't ready for some of the, despite having years of notice, weren't ready for the change. But yeah, I mean, but I don't think that was labeled Defender for endpoint. I think it was just Defender. But again, here's the complexity of the problem that me and Matt have been doing this now for decades. We were both working this when that stuff rolled out, and we don't fully remember.
I was going to say, we need other podcasts have that guy that you yell to in the back who can Google and fact check you. We need one of those for future episodes. And you could be right. I'll say that when Vista rolled out, that was when I was knee deep in kind of Linux only, and I really avoided the Vista rollout on a personal and professional level until it kind of matured a little bit. So that is a timeline in my past that was pretty fuzzy for me. I was literally running Ubuntu on a laptop then because I just was kind of like, I'm getting out of Windows for a while kind of attitude.
So for professional reasons, I was very, very interested in security products at that time. And exactly how they worked under the hood and how to evade them. So hey, a couple of notes here, right? I feel like we'd be remiss not to discuss a couple other points here, right? One is this is going to create zero question. This is going to create phishing opportunities and social engineering opportunities for threat actors. If you're seeing this, I don't know when we're pushing this, but if you're seeing this early, contact your folks to the extent you can. Stay in comms, even if there's just nothing to update. You just stay in comms. Say, hey, this is, and by the way, if we push this too late, right, where you're all done with your CrowdStrike remediation, put this in the plan for the next one because there will be a next one. If it's not CrowdStrike, it'll be something else, right? The reality is that most of your users have no idea what BitLocker is. They have no idea what safe mode is. They have no idea what, like, them walking through this stuff, this just is not, you're creating lots of opportunities for threat actors. Reality too, for a lot of organizations is that they are, in a lot of cases, going to get on the phone and read off a BitLocker recovery key to a non-IT person and say, now very slowly type these commands that I just sent you over SMS, right? In this big scary black window, right? The command prompt, right? And then reboot your system. And what we've just done is we've trained our users to be socially engineered.
At a really deep level too, right? Like and it's not enter this password into a familiar prompt, which we've that's one of the things I think phishing campaigns are good at training you against, right? Yes. It's like, you get a familiar link and you put a thing into a familiar web window and it's like, oh, shouldn't have done that. I should have noticed the browser. I should have noticed this. Like, This is hold down shift while you boot, which is not a thing most people even know anymore. And then it's like, all right, click this thing called command prompt, which you may or may not have ever heard of. And, that's what a lot of people I've heard colloquially, my non-IT friends, that'll be like, that's the screen where hackers go, right? Because that's just what command prompts are to the unindoctrinated.
Sure. Yeah.
And you've now given them that understanding. And to your point, like, yeah, absolutely. Follow-up phone call next week being like, there's another CrowdStrike problem. Remember what we did last week? And getting people to go in and put, go do I don't remember what the DOS equivalent of a wget is. But like, download this payload, right? And just, I'm sorry?
It's 3 letters. It's when you open up PowerShell, it's IWR, invoke web request.
There you go. Right? So yeah, just IWR this file from a really nicely named domain, and then we made it easy. Just do that and execute it, and then we take it from here, right?
Matt, it gets even easier than that because that's where you wrap it in IEX and invoke expression. So you invoke expression parenthesis IWR download, right? And so you download, it's what we call a PowerShell download cradle in your offensive operations team. It really is that easy. I mean, we're talking about here, just a handful of characters to go.
It's and I think that needs to be the episode takeaway here, right? Is that like this, because this is new, right? I don't think it's new in that nothing ever like it has happened before, but we've progressed to a level of trust with these third-party tools, which is only the last few years have we gotten to the point of cloud-based EDR deployments just being pervasive like this. It's kind of novel it's certainly novel to the end user, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's there's nothing new under the sun in technology, but it's business-wise and user experience-wise, it's a novel problem. And I think that's the takeaway, is that like now people are going to have to go through these manual steps. The remote workforce is the most remote it's ever been.
Yep.
So IT teams, first off, hug ops for all the IT people that need to push this out to everybody, right? Like I have deep well of empathies for the people that are in end user support today who are not going home this weekend.
Yeah.
And that's everywhere in every company that's deployed CrowdStrike, which is a lot of them. And then, we need to follow this outage with really strong messaging. And it's almost, I picture almost like the nuclear keys on submarines, where you got to like have a code word that your end users know. You need like a shibboleth so that IT people, when they're telling you to do something this wonky, like you have a way, some out of bound way to know that it's just not somebody that's in the phishing enterprise.
Yep.
There needs to be some process safeguards in place, because we've just given attackers a whole new, we've trained, to your point, we've trained end users just enough where hackers now can exploit it in a way that before anyone would have been like, you want me to do what with what? Right? Like they would have just hung up the phone and called their help desk number and instantly. And now it's like an expected follow-up. I didn't even think of that. That's a really good point. Probably the most important point we've made today, honestly.
Can I put you on the spot and ask you like a really hard question?
Sure. I can't say I can answer it, but absolutely. Go ahead and ask.
Not a tech question. This is a philosophical, not a deep tech.
Right? Still don't promise I can answer it, but go for it.
So look, we're talking about safe mode, and one of the ways that you keep your users out of safe mode, right? Well, one, obviously you need a local admin account. Your users don't have passwords for local admin accounts. Don't get me started on all of that, because that's going to be do you have laps or some other way to do, like randomization of local admin passwords for systems? I'm gonna leave that one out for a second. My bigger concern is BitLocker, right? Because that's the thing that stops a lot of not having that BitLocker recovery key, right? Is that critical step that that prevents random Joe, right, from doing a cold boot attack, right?
It means physical access doesn't equal compromise. Right? I mean, really, that's what BitLocker is.
Right, but then you've got the safe mode side of things, where you can set up Windows explicitly that anytime you want to boot to safe mode, you got to have the recovery key. Ordinarily, Windows doesn't require it. I say ordinarily. In a default config, I believe, unless you changed secure boot or made a change to boot configuration data, or there's been a detected hack effectively, right? So some weird change to like a patch guard. Like some set of weirdness has to happen in a default Windows config before Windows requires the key. But you as an admin can set that. And we've had it in security best practices for years, since Windows 10 was released in 2016-ish, right? To say, hey, you should enable this, because who's going to boot to safe mode legitimately? It doesn't need the BitLocker recovery key. With that background, do you change that after today? Not with your security hat on. I want you to put you're a CISO and the CIO. Like so many of our small, medium businesses, some of our small, medium enterprises, you're wearing both of those hats. What do you do today?
That's a tough call. I mean, so for me, it comes back to some degree, there's a user training question in there, right? Which is to say it's your data and we trust you to protect it when you can log in, right? That you're not going to send it to the wrong place. So notionally, we've already given you, quote unquote, that BitLocker key, right? Like not physically, but I mean that you have access to the data that the BitLocker key is protecting. So the idea that you're giving them something new is kind of a point of view question, right? Sure. Because, you're giving them a new way to work around access. You're giving a new way to do things from a different vantage point in the operating system and infrastructure. But the thing that the BitLocker key is protecting, you are the person trusted with doing that. So I guess the CIO hat tells me you just give people their BitLocker keys and you train them on how to use them and where not to share them. You worry about removing friction from these recovery scenarios as a CIO. As a CISO, it's like, absolutely not. We have a procedure by which you call a trusted agent that can issue you your key over the phone. And then as soon as we get you back online, that key is rolled.
Right.
And that puts more friction into the recovery process and a future event.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm distinguishing the hats that, the dual personalities you've dubbed me with for the thought question. But it's like, the real question is can you trust your users with the unlock key? And I think reasonably speaking, it depends on your industry. It depends on your average user's technology literacy.
Mm-hmm.
But in the vast majority of industries where the technology is really just a means to an end, you're not a company with a strong technical culture. So like I would say for Hunter, except for people in our corporate center and back office support roles, almost everybody that works here has their own home lab and has like this deeper understanding where you can kind of expect them to know that the BitLocker key that you're giving them is like a highly trusted thing. But at Marriott, where you dealt with it today, in the airlines that can't check in users, and I don't know all airlines, but Delta reported that they couldn't do it. So that's a pretty big swath of American air traffic able to take off today.
They said they literally didn't say they're delaying. They literally issued a notice saying that they're pausing operations.
Yep. And can you expect your average flight attendant that is dueling with desk duty, right, to have that level of understanding? And even that gets even more complicated because in organizations like Hunter, your endpoint is yours. You take it home with you, right? You have some privy over the physical security of that endpoint. In a lot of these businesses, these are shared endpoints.
Yeah.
Right. So like who would even be the one to have that BitLocker key? So yeah, that's like I said, I don't think I actually answered your question.
No, I mean, but
I think I opined on it reasonably.
Well, so I guess I would really come here, if you're listening to this and you're like, man, Matt sucked at answering that question, right? That first off, not a reflection of Matt, right? It's a reflection of how intentionally hard that question was. But it's one that everybody has to be considering here, right? Because it's the CIA triad, right? Confidentiality, integrity, availability. And look, if I'm wearing both hats, and I know I'm going to take some security hate here, but if I'm wearing both hats, CIO and CISO, I'm going to tell you, man, like confidentiality in most cases is going to be secondary to availability. And so, look, all the security tools in the world, right? They're there to mitigate against a potential risk. A potential event. At the end of the day, right, the thing that I care about, right, first and foremost is can my systems operate the way they were intended? Can they generate revenue as they were intended?
Yeah, it's always interesting because I'm now just picturing as a response to this, people that lean heavily into availability now having on their asset tags a scrubbable tag with the BitLocker key just stuck on the computer, which is like a total end around on the notion of endpoint encryption. But like I could easily see that being some people's response to this is just like, well, we need to get them online, and every month we'll go and send somebody to each of our shared endpoints at all of our hotel chains and just put a new sticker on with a new BitLocker key and roll them. Like that's going to be your far liberal availability rules all. Then you've got your other side, which is to say, no, we're gonna hire a whole new set of people in our centralized help desk whose only job it's going to be is to make sure that you have access to that when you need it. But it's got to be done via phone call. We got to figure out an authentication process so that the person on the other end is really who they say they are, right? So you can't social engineer your way into those keys. That's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, it's a non-trivial question. And look, we haven't even discussed the big elephant in the room, and that's that lots of people don't have good BitLocker key management. We do a couple of forensics cases a year, right? At least I do. I don't, again, I'm obviously new at Hunter. I don't think we have a full digital forensics practice yet, but I do a couple of forensics cases a year where somebody sends me a laptop and they don't have the BitLocker key for it, despite being a Fortune 100, right? You go down to your SMB, SMEs, right? Small, medium business, small, medium enterprises. Good luck with that. Now, all these people tell you they have all the BitLocker keys. Don't worry, and they send you a BitLocker. They send you a BitLocker key. They have a spreadsheet or an inventory someplace where they've got a key. Matt, you said one of the important things, rotate that key, right? Yeah, okay. But did you update, your tracking on it? Because they'll send me a key and they're like, well, this is definitely it. And I'm like, the laws of mathematics tell me this is definitely not it. And so you can tell me about your spreadsheet and inventory all day long. I'm going to talk to you about AES, our little friend, right? And AES says you are wrong. Anyway, these are not, I guess the great point to close with beyond the social engineering side, please go educate your staff. Please come up with some system, right, to prevent them from getting social engineered after this, because there is blood in the water. But I mean, just realize the operational challenges when we've got collectively what? Actually, you know what? Let's not count the years between us of IT and security experience, just between the two of us. But let's.
It's only double digits. Let's leave it at that. It's double digits.
Yeah, it's
high double digits.
Digits.
We haven't gotten into triple digits between the two of us yet.
But I mean, again, the fact that we can't just be like, and here's the answer, it's because it's hard questions. And there's no one right answer. It's all a balancing act. That's why you hear us kind of talking to both sides of it piece, and be nice to your IT folks, and they need it.
Okay, just to kind of summarize, obviously the points you mentioned on user training and avoiding this new novel social engineering capability, I think is number one. Number two, for any listeners that work in EDR product management side, let's consider a staged rollout capability for your end users. It will now be a marketing win for something that, and CISOs and people in security, ask your EDR vendor if this is on the roadmap. Mm-hmm. We know none of them have it today, but it's not a new approach to doing it. And lastly, good luck out there to everybody this weekend that's going to be spending a lot of their time pumping BitLocker keys to their end users and to end users that are waiting on very, very long hold and callback times to be able to do sometimes really critical jobs.
Yep.
And for those that are not doing critical jobs, enjoy your long weekend. Thanks for joining us today, Jake. We'll still do the firmware one. We'll get that rescheduled, but I definitely think that this was a better thing to put out given the timely nature of such an interesting incident.
It's a fantastic pivot, man. I love it.
Enjoy the rest of your weekend in Vegas, especially if you can't get a flight out.
I think there's odds that are pretty good. So thanks.